Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, spring football started today. How do you think it's going?
This is one of the great times of year because we get all of this kind of information that we've been talking about for since January. And now, instead of speculating, we get a little bit more information that we can then also speculate from that. But it's just good to have information and have some answers that lead to more questions, but more information is definitely better. And we did get more information today after hearing from Ryan Day, Jim Knowles, and Kevin Wilson, Tom.
We did, and I feel like we need to have our standard practice one of spring disclaimer, which is we know more than we did 12 hours ago. We don't know how much of what we know now is going to stick, how much is going to be truly real, and how much was just like, well, we're just trying something now, and then we'll, that'll all be changed 2 weeks from now. But you feel like you know a little bit more. Some of the stuff, as we were kind of like looking at some things that had changed today, there were a couple like, we definitely talked about that. I don't remember when we talked about that, but we definitely talked about that at some point in the past. So, okay, good, we were right about that. But yeah, you never know exactly how much to really put a lot of stock into on day one of spring ball.
Although, Tom, to be fair, when you do 40 shows a week, you're probably going to talk about just about every single scenario that could possibly come up. So let's not pat ourselves on our backs too much, but a little. You say don't hold us accountable for everything we say moving forward based on one spring practice or talking to some coaches. I say hold us accountable. I am from the school of bold predictors where, you know what? I'm responsible for my predictions. I am responsible for my thoughts, my projections, my opinions. And if you disagree with them, hold me accountable. You can send anything to at Tom Orr 4. Any emails to
nope.
Any texts to 614.
Also no.
But so, Tom, we do have a lot to talk about after hearing from Ryan Day, Jim Knowles, and Kevin Wilson. And so let's get into it. And this is probably going to span 2 shows. I don't imagine we're going to get through all of this in 1/2 hour today. But let's first talk about the guys who are not participating in spring football. That's always something that is, I don't want to say a surprise, but you learn that some of this is out of the blue, but not all of it. So the 10 guys out right now for spring: walk-on linebackers Ryan Batch and Cade Stover, defensive end Jacoby Cowan, running back Marcus Crowley, which we expected, safety Jansen Dunn, defensive end Tyler Friday, offensive lineman Josh Fryer and Harry Miller, safety Lathan Ransom, which we expected, and tight end / fullback Mitch Rossi. Now, there's some significant names in there, some unfortunate names in there. The Harry Miller thing is still, you'd have liked to have seen him competing for something this spring. That's not going to happen. The Josh Fryer thing, I think, is a little bit of a surprise and a disappointment because he's a guy that has been coming on as well. The Jacoby Cowan, it might be kind of out of the blue that I spent some time on him right now, but this is a kid who has been injured for most of his career, has missed significant portions of time, so this is another setback. Anything else that strikes you from this list, Tom?
Yeah, I mean, Tyler Friday being out, that I think is one that you were sort of hoping he might be ready to come back this spring. He missed obviously all of last season, and you go back a week or so, and we were talking about him as someone who, if he was able to go, this could have been potentially a very big spring for him to be able to get back into the rotation and have what could be, I think, will be his final year, if I have not done my COVID math incorrectly. This was potentially a big spring for him. This was potentially a big spring from Harry Miller, but we didn't know the status of him. Josh Fryer was another guy who was someone who we expected to potentially be in the running for a position, at least, to make a run for one of those open guard spots potentially, or be the number 2 guy at tackle. Like, those were all guys who could potentially have had big springs. Fryer got hurt right before the Rose Bowl. I think that might have even been in bowl practice. So, I wasn't shocked to see him not available this spring, but yeah, there's a couple guys on here who I think are really, you're really missing out. But, the flip side of that is we weren't sure if Josh Proctor was going to be practicing this spring. And while he's not back 100%, he's someone who is, he is back. He is not on this list. He will be available at some point this spring, presumably. Cam Babb, too. That was someone, Cam Babb, I think, is someone that, and we can talk about both of those guys in a minute, but Cam Babb, holy smokes, if you can't root for Cam Babb to have a good year this year, there is something deeply wrong with you. He's been on campus for 4 full years now and has only gotten to play 1 season, has yet to catch a pass as a wide receiver, but it was voted to team captain. So if he is healthy, he looks like he's full go this spring. It would be really awesome if Cam Babb could have a good season and be some kind of contributor for the Buckeyes this fall.
And I believe he is wearing the number 1 as well, to give you a sense of the importance, the respect that he has from the team. So yeah, he is full go. Ryan Day said he's full go. So and if he stays that way, they said he'll have a role in the offense, and you certainly hope that. You hope he can have that final send-off, although he's probably got about 3 years of eligibility left if he really went to the NCAA and was like, bruh, come on, let's talk. Come on, let's look at this. But that's really good to see. Josh Proctor, they're not sure if he's going to eventually be full go, but they'll work him back into some drills down, throughout spring, and so that is good as well. Obviously, you would have liked to have him full go. They said back in December he was ahead of schedule, so he's running and all of that, but there's still questions at safety that would have been nice if you could answer them all with everybody healthy. And of course, Jansen Dunn and Lathan Ransom not part of that group either. Is you can't answer all of the questions when half of the safeties are kind of not ready to go, but. So let's talk about some of the major takeaways from the day. I've written some down, Tom. Don't worry about if you have something you would like to add. You are more than welcome to steer this thing any which way you want. But I think maybe I don't know if it was the top one, but the need for leadership and the focus on leadership this winter. That when the coaches looked at this team and said, what do we need? And there was, Kevin Wilson said he noticed it in February. They need leaders. And so they went about these off-season workouts, these winter workouts. At one point, Day explained it they had a team meeting. They said, hey, we need leaders. Who wants to volunteer to be leaders? And so a bunch of hands went up. Then I think maybe those leaders were elected, and then they ran groups of players. They had groups of players under them. And these groups were, they were graded on workouts, what time you show up, if you're late, if you're early, how you do this, how you do that, graded on so many different things. And players were held responsible. Players held each other accountable. And if players were late, that group had community service and things like that they had to accomplish. And you just look at the makeup of the team. Kevin Wilson said it himself. He's like, yeah, C.J. Stroud, it's great to have a starting quarterback come back, but he's got 13 starts under his belt. They have so many second-year guys who are second-year starters where they have experience, but they don't have a lot of experience. And so this forcing of leadership, they think is going to do them well. But then, as Kevin Wilson said, it looks great now, but you won't truly know until the backs are against the wall on 4th down in October or something like that.
And that's the tricky part of this, where last year they were one of the youngest teams in the entire country, and they didn't have many 4th and 5th year guys who had been, had to go through the fires before. A lot of their starters were first time starters and were young first time starters. This year you've got some of those guys back. As you said, it's, your veteran leaders are now 3rd year guys. It's you're supposed to have seniors. That's a thing that you're supposed to have. And they just don't have that many of those, 4th year guys, 5th year guys who are consistently healthy starters on this team. So you're looking at, Paris Johnson might be one of the leaders on the offensive line. Luke Whippler might be one of the leaders on the offensive line. Well, those guys are coming back as 2nd year starters. They're only 3rd year players. C.J. Stroud, 2nd year starter, 3rd year player. Your starting running back is Travion Henderson, probably, who's a 2nd year starter, 2nd year player. Jaxon Smith-Njigba, leading wide receiver, 2nd year starter, third-year player. I mean, this is still a fairly young team, where the guys who are in their fourth and fifth year who are starters, that's almost the exception in a lot of places on this team, which is that does present a little bit of a challenge. So it was interesting to me that you heard at the end of last year, or a lot of Ohio State fans talking about toughness being what that team was lacking at the end of last season. It's interesting that you didn't hear a ton of talk about toughness this year, on day one of spring ball. That leadership was kind of what they were sort of stressing, because Kevin Wilson said basically they didn't have someone who, when halftime in Ann Arbor, they didn't have someone who was ready to sort of stand up and be the team leader in the locker room in Ann Arbor, kind of at the end of last season. You sort of had that at the Rose Bowl, so it seems like that was sort of starting to develop, but that is definitely going to be a big point of emphasis for this team moving forward.
Yeah, Day even said it. He said, we didn't have that in the Team Up North game. That's just the truth. And they did have that in the Rose Bowl. And so they want to continue that and will work towards making that happen, which, it's the line of the thin line between great and elite, I think goes into stuff like that. And then one other note here, we even forgot to mention the Mitchell Melton cross-training at defensive end. This was a guy that a big linebacker, probably, Tom, you believe that you have mentioned this as a definite probability earlier in one of our shows.
Well, and yes, this is the challenge of talking to a number of different people on podcasts and having sort of similar conversations with different people. And I could not for the life of me remember whether this was on one of the Morning Scoop spring preview shows with Kevin Noon, or on the Ross Fulton, the things he's going to be watching for in the spring show on the Morning Scoop, or whether that was one of the Buckeye Weekly shows. But I swear I had a conversation with someone a week or two ago about the fact that it seems like the trend with the Jim Knowles defense is you're focusing on the quickness, and you're maybe taking guys who are a little bit more tweeners and putting them kind of a level closer to the line of scrimmage than they might be. Like, when in doubt, move them closer to the line of scrimmage. So safeties like Court Williams could end up being a linebacker. It sounds like they're going to keep Court Williams at safety, so that's a bad example. But, Cade Stover, linebacker, could be a defensive end. Mitchell Melton was the guy who I very clearly remember talking to someone about this last week. Mitchell Melton, he is that kind of big Sam linebacker. It sounds like they're really not going to be using that big Sam linebacker very much this year, so there's an opportunity for him to maybe shift from linebacker to defensive end. And the idea is you kind of have those a little bit smaller but quicker guys who are a little bit more flexible, can maybe play a little bit faster in space and track guys down more in the open field. So yeah, that was something that he was working with the defensive linemen at least some on Tuesday. So that I think is something that is worth monitoring, keeping moving forward, but probably indicative that is somewhat the philosophy here. A little smaller but a little quicker is probably better than bigger or slower in terms of where guys are going to fit on this defense this year.
It's interesting that you remember saying that. As a kid, I remember reading the Berenstein books, the Berenstein Bears books. I remember one time watching a movie with Shaq as a genie. Or, I remember all of these different things that never happened, Tom. So I believe this may be just your Mandela effect, your Mitchell Melton Della effect chiming in. But no, I do remember that as well, Tom, so I will give you that credit. So that's one more to watch, one other thing to watch. I want to talk about the receivers now, Tom. We're just going to go back and forth because there's all kinds of stuff that we have to touch on. But Day was asked, you're going to play 5-6 receivers like you used to? And Day said, well, you'd like to. And it always just starts with finding one, then finding two, then finding three, and so on. And so that's where the process is right now. He was asked if Jaxon Smith-Njigba is going to stay in the slot. And the answer is yes, but you can't just, he's going to move around just like he did last year. And as Kevin Wilson said, depends on also how many 2 tight ends, how many 12 personnel that they play, where you'll have to move him out. And even if he's playing outside, they can move him inside. They can move inside to outside. So basically what it was they saying we have to move him around the follow-up was, well, do you do that because there are guys behind him or because you got to show the defense something different with him? And the answer is yes, basically, to both of those. You don't want to just do the same thing over and over with him with the defense. Also, there are other guys who can play. And so this is something we've talked about where you can put him wherever. That's how Brian Hartline trains his receivers. They understand schemes and what each position should be doing, so they can go from one to the other. And so that's where he stands right now. Tom, I thought it was interesting. Jaden Ballard kept getting some mentions from I think from both Ryan Day and Kevin Wilson about the offseason that he has had. So while we talk about Marvin Harrison and Emeka Egbuka and Julian Fleming, let's not forget about Jaden Ballard, which I think is something that I had said in a previous show one time or another.
You know, Tony, I remember being a kid and reading a book about the Berenstain Bears. No, I'm kidding. Jaden Ballard's an interesting case because he was someone who came in as a player who I think everyone kind of looked at and said, okay, he's going to need a year or two. Here he is, year two. You kept hearing, like, you know, sometimes guys will just kind of like rattle off a bunch of names for like, oh yeah, this guy had a good offseason. That's fine. When you hear it from multiple people, when you heard it from Kevin Wilson, you heard it from Ryan Day, like, okay, that starts to mean something. Something else that means something. Jaden Ballard has a new uniform number this year. He is now number 9. They do not give those single-digit jerseys out to just anyone, so that's another little data point there. Number 9, Jaden Ballard, the comp for him has always been Devin Smith because he is a Massillon, Washington guy. He is that deep threat wide receiver guy. He wore the same number as Devin Smith in high school, so that has always been the comp for him. And it was, boy, if he can turn into that guy, that could be a really big-time player, but there was some work to do. It sounds like the work has been done, or a lot of that work has been done to make some progress there. So, yeah, that I think is a really, really interesting possible, piece of good news on day one of spring ball, if he's in that conversation as well. They would obviously like to play as many guys as they possibly could. They would like to feel good about having 5 guys that they feel really good about, maybe 6 guys. I mean, there's a lot of freshmen who could come in and maybe work their way into that rotation. Someone is going to get hurt this year. That just happens. I don't want to spoil any surprises, but I don't think Jaxon Smith-Njigba is going to play 5 full seasons at Ohio State, so you're going to have to replace his production at some point. Julian Fleming, as crazy as it sounds, theoretically could go to the NFL after this season if he has a big year. I mean, you've got to kind of keep that assembly line moving. So, yeah, if they can get production out of Jaden Ballard this year, that would be, he may fit a role that, Marvin Harrison doesn't necessarily fit. And maybe Jaxon Smith-Njigba doesn't. Jaxon Smith-Njigba is a great receiver. He's not necessarily your deep threat wide receiver. He's the sort of catch and run wide receiver more. You need someone to be that deep threat wide receiver. Is that Julian Fleming? Is that Emeka Egbuka? Is that Jaden Ballard? I mean, you have options there. So having those options is a good thing. But yeah, I mean, to your point, you have to find, you've got to find 1, to find 2, to find 3, to find 4. It does seem like there are going to be enough options there that they should be able to get to 4 or 5 guys they feel really good about. And then, I mean, I guess you can talk a little bit about the tight end thing, because Kevin Wilson's answer on that was, in typical Kevin Wilson fashion, a really interesting answer on like how are they going to parse out the tight end playing time this year.
Yeah, good luck with that. And they've got to find one. They've got to find a starter. And he said like they could just go, just depending on what they need at that moment in that play. It could be G. Scott. It could be Joe Royer. It could be Mitch Rossi. Or even at one point he said that little Herb Street kid. I think maybe his exact words when talking about the tight end / fullback. I do want to apologize. I said Mandela effect and I mentioned Shaq. It was actually Sinbad, I think, as we all know. I just didn't want any feedback, negative feedback on that one. Like our last negative review, Tom, when one of us, me, mentioned was Janine Turner in Demolition Man, and of course you corrected me. Somebody left a 3-star review of the show correcting me on that one. So thank you for that. Real quick on the number changes, I think let's spend a couple minutes on that, or a minute. Emeka Egbuka goes from 12 to 2. An Ohio State receiver wearing number 2 is always special. Mayan Williams goes from 28 to 3, which I think is interesting. Cade Stover is wearing number 8 right now. Xavier Johnson, the walk-on running back receiver, do-it-all guy, is now wearing 10 from 25. C.J. Hicks is 11. We kind of saw that a few days ago. Caleb Burton takes Emeka Egbuka's number 12. Tanner McAllister checks in with number 15. And also Devin Brown with number 15. Tom, the last Ohio State starting quarterback to wear number 15. Think about that. And then Keon Gray's wearing number 17, which I think is interesting because there's been when I watch Keon Gray's, I was the first person to say, hey, he looks like Chris Olave. I was the first person to say that. He is wearing Chris Olave's original number 17. Other receivers to wear number 17, Santonio Holmes, Chris Tippy-Toe Sanders, Jalen Marshall. Looking at Chip Trayanum comes in at number 19, Ryan Turner, number 24, the freshman. Tom, here is something. Gabe Powers, linebacker, Ohio State, wearing number 36. It's about time.
That's that is a linebacker number at Ohio State. Yeah, Brian Roll, Chris Spielman. Yeah, there have been some pretty good linebackers wearing number 36 at Ohio State over the years. Quarterback wearing number 15. I'm trying to remember, was that Greg Fry's number? Is that the last quarterback to wear 15 at Ohio State?
Although Scott McMullen, was he 15 as well? Or was
he did? Yeah. Yes, I believe he was. Granville, Ohio's own Scott McMullen. Yes.
I set that up for you, and what do you do?
Well,
you went too far back.
I thought you meant starters, but I guess he did start. He did start. I was just kind of like scrolling back mentally through starting quarterbacks. But yes, he did start a couple games, and he was on a Granville team that went undefeated, and then their schedule was so weak because the surrounding towns were so bad at football at the time. They were undefeated and missed the state playoffs. Like, what? How does that happen? So, yeah, that's and then he came in and he saved the day at Penn State in 2003 in that game. He came in. I think he played in the Michigan game in 2003 as well. So yeah, he had. He was a little bit of a Kenny Guyton before Kenny Guyton at Ohio State.
Yeah, he was, and we don't need to go too much on Scott McMullen. Sorry, Tom. But in that 2003 season, there were times where people were calling for Craig Krenzel to be benched. I was one of them, and it's kind of odd where you would call for the national championship winning quarterback the previous year to be benched. But that's how well Krenzel was not playing. Tom, Cade Stover is on defense right now. It seems like he's going to stay there. Ryan Day said it's going to be up to Cade Stover, and it may come down to how much he wants to play because there is a huge job opening at tight end right now. But in his heart, Cade Stover is a defensive player. Day thinks he could be a great tight end, and will let him. There is no timetable on that decision. Jim Knowles also really, really likes him, likes his attitude, likes his demeanor, all of that stuff that makes a defensive guy. And he's at linebacker right now, but said that they may have to find a job for him. And when Jim Knowles says stuff like that, that means like he can do some stuff. Now it's my job to figure out how to use that. And that's one of the things that has made Bill Belichick great at New England, where they niche things that you can do. Well, let's make it more than a niche or just utilize that. I think Cade Stover can be more than a niche, but because of his abilities, he's causing Knowles to, think how can I use him? What's the best way to get him in there? Where can he make the biggest impact? So that will be interesting to watch. Really, that's Knowles' entire one of his focuses this spring is getting as much as he can see from these guys, figuring out how best to use them. Cade Stover, I assume, from the talks, it sounds like he will eventually work his way into that Leo hybrid role, which has not yet been implemented because they're just going through some basics right now. But sounds like Stover will stay on defense. Kevin Wilson was asked about it at the end of his session, and he respectfully declined to answer it for whatever reason.
Yeah, sometimes coaches don't want to talk about guys who they've lost. I remember a couple of years ago, and now I'm trying to remember which player it was, but it was, I think it was like Al Washington, and it might have been Steel Chambers actually. Al Washington and Tony Alford, and asking Al Washington about fighting for a player. Like, how do you guys work that out? If it's like, well, the guy could be a running back or a linebacker, how do you guys work that out? And Al Washington like yelled across the field to Tony Alford, "They're asking if I want to fight you over Steel Chambers," or whoever the player was at the time. Al Washington ended up winning that one, so ultimately, but it took a little while. You get the sense that they have reached a point of Cade Stover's career where they have two choices, and the second one is to get off the pot. So you've got to kind of figure out now, like, it's okay, he's been here he was here in 2019, so he's now been here 3 years. This is his fourth year. Okay, what are you going to do with him? Because he started as a linebacker and then moved to defensive end and then moved to tight end and then moved back to linebacker last year. It's like, okay, like, at some point, like, everybody loves this guy. Somebody has to do something with him. You cannot just, everyone loves him. Take advantage of that while you have him here. His eligibility clock is ticking. You don't want guys to come and just feel like they've wasted their careers just bouncing from room to room to room. There's a place for him. What is that place going to be? And you get the sense listening to Jim Knowles that he's like a little bit like a kid on Christmas morning where he like can't believe all the new toys he gets to play with. Like, oh my gosh, look at this! It's look, the defensive linemen all have the G.I. Joe karate chopping arm, and all the all the Barbies have the Malibu Dream House, and oh my gosh, this is the most incredible thing, because these are bigger and faster and stronger players than he is used to getting to work with. So that's very exciting for him. So now it's just a matter of finding what is that place. But you do get the sense that even if they're not completely, Cade Stover is still listed as a tight end on the official roster right now, but he was working at defense on the defensive side of the ball at practice on Tuesday. So you get the sense that that's where he's going to end up. I think that's where he wants to end up ultimately. I think that's where he probably has more of a future. So, okay, is that a linebacker? Is that that stand-up defensive end spot, the weak side spot? Again, following my well-established theory from before spring practice even started, they're probably going to tend towards playing the guys at the a little closer to the line of scrimmage to try and play up the speed a little bit. My guess would be that that's where he ends up, but there's some they're going to kind of figure things out. And if you're wondering why they are still playing 4-down stuff and they haven't really introduced that yet, Larry Johnson has always been a 4-down guy. This is what all of these players have been taught. This is what all of these players have known for their entire Ohio State careers. So you start them with the stuff that they're familiar with, and then you're going to start to work the other stuff in, maybe after spring break or something like that. So the Leo position, whatever, the Jack position, whatever you want to call it, it's not, that is not happening. It just hasn't happened yet. So they'll kind of work that in as they work their way through spring ball. And
it will be interesting to see if it has an Ohio State related name once they finally do implement it. Somebody asked to further your point about the improved talent that he now has. Somebody asked, "Hey, is it what do you have a higher caliber of talent? What's it like?" And trying to be as respectful as he could, I think he paused for a minute and was like, "Yeah, it's it's impressive to me," is what his exact quote was. It's impressive to me to see the big guys that can run and all of these different guys who can run and do this and do that. And so now his job, you almost don't want to be too effusive in your praise for, "Oh God, these guys are amazing," because if they don't live up to anything, then that's on you. And that was one of the things he kept talking about, where if a play doesn't get made, that's on him for not teaching it to the player. And if players are thinking, that means they haven't learned it. And so that's on him as a teacher. If players don't learn, it's the fault of the teacher. And so, he is very impressed with what he has seen. And now he gets to go to this drawing board. Well, not now. In May, you get to go to this drawing board and figure out all of these different things like that he can do, and who fits where and who can do what. And now he's going to be doing that throughout the spring so that he can see who can do what and can't. And then you figure out and go from there. But clearly he was excited about not just the caliber of athletes, but he was talking about how Cade Stover and a number of other guys, we'll get into the safeties in the next show, about, "I really like this guy. I want him to play. I want this guy on the field. I want this guy on the field." And after a while, I want to be like, you can't have everybody. It's like he's in the final round of Wheel of Fortune. He's like, I'll take a C, I'll take a B, I'll take an L, I'll take a W, I'll take a D, and a C, and an S. And it's like, you can have 3 letters and a vowel. That's all you get. And, so I think he likes what he's seen so far.
Yeah, I mean, whenever you have access to this kind of players, I mean, that's a real feather in your map. That's something you really can't. I like when you react and don't make any noise. So I see you reacting, but and everyone's like, why is he pausing? Did he have a stroke? What's going on?
I didn't want to interrupt your fantastic Wheel of Fortune drop in.
I didn't want to encourage you. Just go ahead and say it. We all know you're thinking it. I didn't want to encourage you.
Yes, I looked away.
Yeah, no, he is. This is something where he's kind of had to work with, not the scratch and dent sale, because I mean Oklahoma State has some good players, but he's you go through his career and it's Cornell and then Duke and then Oklahoma State, and it's like these are not places that recruit in the same. They're not shopping in the same aisles as Ohio State's coaches are. So now you have guys who, you're asking guys to, I've talked to Ross Fulton about this a bunch on various shows where they're trying to spill plays outside and then run guys down. Well, your guys are now faster than they used to be. Your guys are now stronger than they used to be. You might be able to do even more stuff. You might have more flexibility in areas where you didn't have flexibility before. Like, that's got to be really exciting for him. And you get the sense he's still just sort of scratching the surface. They still don't completely know what they want to do. But yeah, to your point, the safety conversation was funny because he's talking about a backup guy or, someone who's a backup guy last year and just effusive in his praise of this guy. Oh, can't wait to get this guy in the field. And it's like, well, there's a guy ahead of him. He's like, oh, he's amazing too. It was kind of funny to listen to him just sort of, we'll see. I don't yet have the sense for, there are coaches who will gas everyone up. And, Kerry Combs was great at making it sound like every single person was a future number 1 overall draft pick. We don't know Knowles well enough yet to really have a sense for how genuine some of the praise is. But, man, he sure sounded impressed as of day 1.
Yeah, so great tease for tomorrow's Showtime where we get into the safety discussion. That will do it. Anything else you wanted to recap or mention before we get out of here, Tom?
I think we're good for today because there's a whole bunch more stuff to talk about tomorrow. And Tony, as someone who does daily podcasts, I can't tell you what a thrill it is to have new football stuff to talk about. It is a genuine delight. I can't wait for tomorrow's show.
Is that right? Interesting. All right, then that will do it. Thank you all for tuning in. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. However you choose to partake, and we will talk to you guys tomorrow.